What is up, Packers fans? Happy Saturday. Hope your weekend's going well. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Thanks so much for finding us today and making Pack-A-Day part of your daily routine. We are here for you 365 days a year. If you haven't already, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, give those 5-star reviews. Those things help the channel a ton. And of course, make sure to check out those Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube memberships as well. We're going to have a fun exercise today going over Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 prospects and just kind of having a fun little episode going through each of these top 50. And theoretically, I know some of them are going to border on ridiculous because we know they're going to be gone or they're not going to draft a quarterback, whatever. But we're going to go 1 through 50 and just how they would fit with the Green Bay Packers if somehow they ended up on the team. So we're going to go through that today. For those of you who maybe haven't been following it quite as closely, it'll be a nice introduction to each of the players. For those of you who have obviously been following it extremely closely, it's still going to kind of be interesting to see just where they would fit on this particular Packers team. And you never know what can happen in an NFL draft, specifically one that just so happens to be held in your hometown. And maybe a team gets a little aggressive. Maybe they pick up some extra picks. Maybe they move up. Who knows? So you never can really take anything off the board. So we're going to do that in just a moment. Just a really couple quick pieces of news and notes today. Nothing super Packers related. The one semi-pseudo, not really Packers thing, but I find kind of interesting nonetheless, is that Joe Flacco signed with the Cleveland Browns. How does that relate? The only reason it semi kind of sort of ish relates is because Joe Flacco, to me, was one of the final veteran quarterbacks that was out there. Actually, another one, Drew Lock, signed with the Seahawks on Friday as well. Those were kind of the last 2-ish veteran quarterbacks out there. Carson Wentz is still out there, but why that is interesting is because the Minnesota Vikings, JJ McCarthy, apparently is going to be their QB. Their backup right now is Brett Rippon. That's not a backup. That's not a contingency plan. That's not another player who could step in and start if McCarthy has a setback or anything like that. They need some sort of veteran to go alongside of JJ McCarthy. You would think that seems to be the clear and obvious situation. Joe Flacco was one of those veterans that was out there that you could have maybe brought yourself to thinking, all right, maybe he could be the veteran that goes there. I doubt it was going to be Drew Lock, but Drew Lock was one of the only other ones out there, and he goes to Seattle. That leaves Carson Wentz. Maybe I could see Carson Wentz in that offense. I'm not sure that's the direction or the dream direction that maybe Minnesota wants to go in for that, backup quarterback or that other quarterback aside JJ McCarthy, but not an impossible one. Ryan Tannehill, there was some buzz that they were talking to him, maybe bringing him in as that other quarterback. It sounds like Tannehill wants a good chunk of something, whether it's playing time and or money, to get him to leave Tennessee with his family and go to Minnesota. Not sure if that's going to happen. And then, oh yeah, by the way, Aaron Rodgers is still out there. It just, again, as these veterans start to go off the board and you are left with Carson Wentz, Ryan Tannehill, who might not even be interested in playing, and that's kind of it. If Tannehill doesn't come back, it's basically Carson Wentz, or you don't get a veteran, or it's Aaron Rodgers. So that's the only reason that that's interesting. One other scenario that could come out of this is with the Seattle Seahawks signing Drew Lock, Sam Howell, likely available via trade. Not sure he's going to be a player that Minnesota is super interested in, but that could be one other direction that they go in. Obviously, Howell has some starting experience in Washington and spent last year in Seattle. The only other piece, Kevin King, former Packers draft pick. I don't know if you know this. The Packers could have had TJ. I'm kidding. I know you know that. Kevin King re-signs with the Atlanta Falcons. Hanging around in the NFL is Kevin King. So he re-signs with the Atlanta Falcons. Good for him, sticking around in the league, finding that job. And we'll see if he can stick for another year, make the team one more time, and, kind of keep his career going. So good for him re-signing with Atlanta. All right, what I want to do today is go through each of Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 picks and just give you a brief synopsis of, kind of how they would fit if somehow they ended up being a Green Bay Packer. Again, some of these are going to be ridiculous because Abdul Carter is not going to be there. They're not going to draft Cam Ward. We know those things, but we'll do it anyway. And again, for some people, it's going to be an introduction to these top 50 prospects. We're going to go over them lightning round. Otherwise, we'd be here for 3 hours, but we'll go through them and just kind of a quick how they would fit in Green Bay. Number one, Abdul Carter. There's a reason he's number one on the list. He would be a freak edge rusher, just what the doctor ordered for Green Bay. A really fun piece alongside Rashawn Gary. Rashawn Gary, LVN, more of your power rushers. You've got Enigbari and Brenton Cox as rotational pieces. And now you'd have this freak, speedy sort of Von Miller type edge rusher that would be able to come in and add a totally different element to your defense. Can play some off-ball linebacker as well if you needed him to in a pinch. Really, really fun athlete. There's a reason he's going to go that high in the draft. But again, he would be exactly what the doctor ordered at defensive end for Green Bay. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen. Travis Hunter might be the most interesting conversation. Sorry, Abdul Carter, defensive end, Penn State. I should have noted that for those of you who might be new to it. Number two, Travis Hunter, corner and or wide receiver out of Colorado. This is maybe, again, the most interesting player to discuss in the draft as a whole of where he plays. When we talked to Justice, it was either last week or a couple weeks ago, he kind of felt like, I don't, he's not sure that you could do the full, corner and wide receiver thing in the NFL, or at least you have to be a full-time corner and then maybe have a package of plays at wide receiver. If he were to somehow end up in Green Bay, which again, I get the ridiculousness of it, I'm not lost on that. But if he were to somehow end up in Green Bay, I think for Green Bay, you might want him more as a wide receiver to start, and then maybe just a handful of plays here and there and obvious passing downs as a defensive back. But I think Green Bay could probably use his wide receiver prowess a little bit more than his corner ability at the moment. But if I'm Green Bay, I'm still trying to figure out a way that I can use him, obvious passing downs on offense, obvious passing downs on defense, and figure out a way that you can make that work in some way. Number three, Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State. This would be an interesting sort of sell on how you would do this when you already have a loaded running back room. But Jeanty's a freak. He is a stud. He is going to be, in my opinion, not an apples to apples comparison, but a LaDainian Tomlinson level running back in the NFL, that like reaching that caliber of running back. He's that good, in my opinion. This would be somebody that, basically solidifies you as a running team moving forward in Green Bay. Would be insurance for Josh Jacobs, would give you then, I think, 3 locks to make the team in Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, and Ashton Jeanty. And then, again, some maybe transition ability off of Josh Jacobs in 2026 if you started to see signs of wearing down and or didn't want to pay that contract anymore. That could be something that you could do, or you could just tag team Josh Jacobs and Ashton Jeanty moving forward. Number 4, Mason Graham. This would be another sort of dream scenario. You are getting a big-time defensive tackle who can hang against the run, who can penetrate into the backfield, rush the passer. I mean, he gives you everything. Graham and Kenny Clark next to each other would be a ton of fun. Graham and Devontae Wyatt next to each other would be a ton of fun. This solidifies your interior of the defensive line, and I think really solidifies your defensive line in totality. You start putting Mason Graham and Kenny Clark with Rashawn Gary and LVN on the outsides. I think everyone's going to get better by the presence of Graham. It certainly fixes your immediate needs on the defensive tackle, both with run stoppers and with pass rushers with one fell swoop. And then I think in the long term as well, that position that starts to get a little bit barren depending on what happens with Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt going into 2026. This is somebody that you can, I think, anchor your defensive line around moving forward. Number 5 is Jalen Walker. This is another one of these prospects that can be a defensive end really bad at this. Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan. See, when you start studying these people the full time, you just kind of expect everyone to know them. So Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan. Jalen Walker, Georgia, edge rusher / off-ball linebacker. He can do a little bit of both. He is somebody who I think I would probably start a little bit more as an off-ball linebacker. But in Green Bay's case, I think I would start him more as a defensive end and getting him to rush the passer, just because that's a bigger need for Green Bay right now. You could have him be another linebacker in base defense. And in base defense, it kind of makes sense, actually, to have him be maybe the strong side linebacker, have Edgerrin be the weak and Quay be the Mike linebacker in that situation. You could do that. And then on obvious passing downs, especially in obvious passing downs where you could kind of use him as a speed rusher on the outside, Rashawn Gary and Walker on the outside could be something that works there as well. He'd give Jeff Hafley a very unique piece along the defensive front where, again, have him in as a double A gap blitzer, have him as a quarterback spy, rush the passer. You could do so many different things, and he can drop back in coverage a little bit as well. So you get a lot of different uses out of him, but would be a fun piece for Jeff Hafley. Number 6, Tyler Warren, Penn State tight end. This is overkill again at the tight end position, but Tucker Kraft and Tyler Warren as sort of Bash brothers at tight end for the foreseeable future is a lot of fun to think about. They can both block, they can both catch, they can both release down the field. Tyler Warren even was used as a wildcat quarterback and was very good at it. He would replace Tucker Kraft with some of those quarterback sneaks probably immediately because he's actually has that a little bit even more on his resume. Again, overkill at this point. It would basically be telling that, like, hey, we didn't get what we wanted out of Luke Musgrave. And, they're different players. Musgrave and Warren aren't the same. You can still figure out ways to utilize all three of those guys, but it's probably not the smartest use of resources. But I will say Tyler Warren and Tucker Kraft together at tight end for the next 8 to 10 years, maybe 6 to 8 years, would be a lot of fun in Green Bay. Number 7, Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. Similar sort of story here. It's overkill. He's a receiving tight end, although he can block a little bit as well. I think you can use him a little bit in an H-back type of role. So a little bit maybe different than maybe the tight ends that you have on the team right now. But this would, again, be probably more of an indictment of Luke Musgrave and what he's not brought to the team so far. And or just, again, I don't know how much 3 tight end set you can sort of go with, but he's a super talented tight end. Really good catcher, receiver from the tight end position. And then, again, somebody who can help you in the blocking game a little bit as well. Just well-rounded and would give you, again, that 1-2 punch with Tucker Kraft and Colston Loveland. Number 8, Cam Ward. Again, ridiculousness here, but 0% chance it would ever happen. He's going to go number 1 overall to Tennessee. He would immediately come in and challenge Malik Willis for the backup role. In fact, I think in that situation, you probably immediately see what you can get from Malik Willis. Even if it's a 5th, 6th round pick, you probably take what you can get at that point, just because you're not re-signing him next year, and you probably take that pick. Again, you don't need it. I guess you could theoretically have Willis still be the backup if you felt really comfortable with him still. Love be the starter, and then Ward just be kind of a developmental guy long term. If somehow Cam Ward fell to 23, that would be an interesting scenario. I still don't. If he fell to 23, it's because there was some sort of crazy scenario where you had like the Laramie Tunsil, gas mask, sort of thing going on. Was it Tunsil? I think it was Tunsil, right? But yeah, there's just 0% chance it happens, so we don't need to talk about it anymore. But would be certainly Green Bay's backup quarterback up until I guess somehow Cam Ward would beat out Jordan Love. It's just a ridiculous conversation, but he's on the list, so we'll talk about it nonetheless. But he would be the backup for the next couple of years until you would probably trade one of your guys. If either Cam Ward showed he was a starter, you trade him away and hopefully get more than what you gave up. And then same thing, if you were to somehow flip Jordan Love, but it's just, again, so far in the level of absurdity, we don't need to go down that path. Number 5, Cam Ward, quarterback, Miami. Number 9, Jahad Campbell, linebacker from Alabama. Off-ball linebacker who might be able to do a little bit of edge rushing as well. This would be somebody who I think would be able to come in and be your 4-3 linebacker right away, next to Quay Walker, and then next to Edgerrin Cooper as well. The ridiculous, insane athleticism that you would have with those 3 linebackers on the field would arguably be the most athletic 3-man linebacker group that has ever existed in the NFL. Like we're literally talking about that. And I think what you would do is probably he'd be your 4-3 linebacker right away. And then I think you would also try to get him in some pass rush situations on the edge to see what he could do up until the point where this would also be a pick, quite frankly, that you're then probably moving on from Quay Walker and not giving him a 5th-year option or extension. And now it's going to be Jahad Campbell and Edgerrin Cooper as your linebackers starting in 2026. So for now, 3rd linebacker in the 4-3, good depth for both Cooper and Quay should either of them get hurt through the course of the year. Can use him a little bit as an edge rusher in the meantime, and then probably takes over for Quay in 2026. Number 10, Will Campbell, offensive tackle, LSU. Tackle, guard, he can play both of them. 4 position versatility, left tackle, left guard, right tackle. And for Will Campbell, I think he would probably come in. If I were Green Bay, what I would probably do is I would say, all right, Will Campbell and Rasheed Walker are going to compete at left tackle, and Jordan Morgan and Sean Ryan are going to compete at right guard. Banks and Jenkins and Tom aren't probably in those conversations. And now you're probably for sure moving on from both Rasheed Walker and Sean Ryan in 2026. And that when they're free agents. and that would put Will Campbell as your long-term left tackle. It could also, you could theoretically also go Jordan Morgan at left tackle if you felt better about that, and Will Campbell at right guard. They're interchangeable. Both of them can play tackle. Both of them can play guard. So just put whatever one you feel is the better tackle and the better guard at whatever position fits best. But one of them would be your starting left tackle, Banks at left guard, Jenkins at center. Either again, Campbell or Morgan would be at right guard eventually, and then Zach Tom at right tackle when he gets his big contract extension. But it would give you some flexibility with Morgan and Campbell and where you would want to play them. But for now, I bet you would get a rotation with Campbell and Walker at left tackle and Morgan and then Sean Ryan at right guard. Number 11, Jahdae Barron, Texas cornerback / defensive back. This would be a really fun piece in Jeff Hafley's secondary because he can be a little bit of everything. He can be a safety, he can be a slot corner, he can be an outside corner, and you start getting to kind of positionless defense where you can move these guys around almost anywhere. And I think you could kind of mix and match with Nixon and Banks and Jahdae Barron and where you kind of want to put those guys. Obviously, Javon Bullard going to be a piece of that as well. But to me, he's the best corner in the draft. Good tackler, good coverage skills, plays amazing in zone defense. He fits very, very well in Jeff Hafley's defense. I think there's actually that might be the first one that we've talked about where there's at least a slight possibility that he gets to 23. And man, if he did, I would be freaking out. Love Jahdae Barron. Number 12, Armand Membu, right tackle, extremely athletic. This would be an interesting scenario because he's a right tackle and Zach Tom's a right tackle. I guess there are some people who think that maybe Membu could be a guard. I guess if it's Green Bay right now with the situation that you're in, I probably would do Jordan Morgan and Rasheed Walker at left tackle and then Membu and Sean Ryan at right guard for now. And then kind of see what you have next year and figure out your best five. And maybe you could try Membu at left tackle. Maybe you try to switch Zach Tom to left tackle. Maybe you just keep Membu at right guard. Either way, again, I sorry if I didn't say it, but offensive tackle out of Missouri. Very, very talented player, could probably fit in a variety of different spots, but huge upside and could be a starting offensive lineman for a very, very long time in this league. No chance he gets to 23, but if he did and somehow found his way to Green Bay, he'd be a very fun piece on that offensive line. Number 13, Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. He's a fast Matt Forte. If you remember the old Bears running back, that's who I kind of see in him a little bit. A faster Matt Forte, I should say. Again, this would be somebody that's a little bit of overkill in the running back room, but can catch the ball to the backfield. He runs really, really well. He again has the speed to kind of break those big runs. I think he can do everything as a running back, quite frankly. Probably a 1-2 punch with Josh Jacobs for the time being. It would probably demote Marshawn Lloyd, and then you got to figure out what you want to do with Chris Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson, probably just keeping one of those guys. Not something that's needed at the moment, but man, if you're going to go all in on the running game, Hampton and Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd would be a heck of a way to do that. Number 14, Will Johnson, corner out of Michigan. Really great fit for Jeff Hafley's defense. Not my favorite guy in this draft. I think there's some flaws in his game, but if you're going to fit him somewhere, fitting him in Green Bay, I think is a really good, really great end spot for him. I think there's actually a decent chance that he could make it to 23. And if so, I think there's a decent chance that he actually is the pick. Great ball skills, great zone cover corner. Again, I think there are some issues with both tackling and just concentration. I just felt like it was very inconsistent from Johnson, both 24 and 23. He's also coming off injury, but he would be very much in the conversation for a starting outside corner right away for the Packers. Number 15, Nick Emanwari, a safety out of South Carolina. I don't know how you use him for Green Bay. He's a safety / slot. I think, here's the issue. He can play safety, he can play slot, he can play nickel linebacker. At safety, you have no room. You have Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney, and neither of them are coming off the field. At nickel corner, I don't know that you're just going to give up on Javon Bullard already. I suppose you're that's probably where he is. You're probably competing him and Javon Bullard against each other. And I don't know if you're rotating him. I don't know what you're doing. If you figure out different packages, you probably use him there. He can also be a nickel linebacker in like obvious passing downs, but you're not taking Quay or Cooper off the field. So you end up in this no man's land where he can do everything, but there's no real place for him in Green Bay at the moment. He would give Jeff Hafley a very unique piece. He is sort of what I kind of consider a poor man's Derwin James. with that ability to play in the slot, safety, like box linebacker, etc. But very, very, very fun player. Jeff Hafley would love figuring out ways to utilize him. There's just not a perfect scenario right now for how he would fit with this team. Matthew Golden, wide receiver, Texas. I mentioned the other day, remember how the Packers, kind of use Greg Jennings? I think you can use Golden in some very similar ways. They're not, again, exact comparison. I'm not comparing Golden to Jennings, but I think that's the type of impact / level of player he could potentially be. He's got 4.29 40 speed. Line up outside, line him up in the slot. You can do a little bit of everything. Good route runner, good hands catcher, a little bit of run after the catch ability. Not the most dynamic guy in the world, but somebody that would come in and give Green Bay a very nice piece at wide receiver. Number 17, Emeka Egbuka. Again, the question here is wide receiver, Ohio State. The question is, can he play outside? I think the answer is yes. Is his best position outside? I think the answer is no. I think you have to get a little bit more creative with how you use Jaden Reed and Emeka Egbuka together. But I think Egbuka is the guy that you can move around a little bit more, probably play him on the outside. He's going to give you a reliable target. He's going to run routes the right way at the right depth. He's going to come back to the football, catch the ball out of the air. He's not like a great deep ball receiver. He's not a, dynamic after the catch guy. He's just a really well-rounded overall wide receiver. And Green Bay could use more of those at the moment. Number 18, Tet McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. Massive wide receiver. I like the Cortland Sutton comp. I think there's a little bit of Drake London to his game, a little bit of Cortland Sutton. I think he's a solid route runner. I think he does not deal great with physicality. He's going to have to kind of overcome that in the NFL and be better against it. But he is a 6'4", go up and get the ball, jump ball specialist. And he is going to be that possession receiver, an outside wide receiver. You can use him a little bit in the slot as well, but that's going to give you a really nice piece at outside wide receiver that Jordan Love can maybe, if he gets into trouble, can throw some of those jump balls to, and just give him some of those chances, those 50-50 chances down the field. And in those situations, he comes up with more of them, but a much needed outside wide receiver for Green Bay. Shedeur Sanders, quarterback, Colorado. He would come in and immediately compete with Malik Willis to be the backup. Again, 0% chance this happens. And then he would replace Malik Willis next year as the backup. And then you kind of go from there and see what you have at the quarterback position. Number 20, Tyler Booker, guard for Alabama. Love Tyler Booker. Not Green Bay's type, not the most, freaky athletic testing dude, but just a really, really good guard. He would come in and immediately compete with Sean Ryan at right guard and then be his replacement in 2026. He would, I think, give Green Bay some real legitimate power inside with Elton Jenkins, Tyler Booker, and Aaron Banks, which I think would be a fun group, both now and down the road. And then, again, you'd probably have Jordan Morgan at left tackle and Zach Tom at right tackle in that situation starting in 2026. Mike Green, edge rusher, Marshall, different flavor of edge rusher than they currently have. He would be a little bit more of a speed guy, bendy guy, very productive in college. And I'm not sure, again, he's going to be their type of guy. He's also got some off-field concerns that they'd have to address, but this would be a different flavor of defensive end than they currently have. Somebody with some juice, I think some much needed juice in that room, and just has a hunter's mentality and finds ways to get to the quarterback no matter what. He would be a welcome addition at edge, assuming the off-field stuff checks out and clears up. Michael Williams, edge rusher, Georgia. Think prime Preston Smith is kind of the player here. Not, again, perfect apples to apples, but what I'll say is fantastic run defender with pass rush upside of think 2019 Preston, where he came in and had double-digit sacks for Green Bay. I'm not saying Michael Williams can do that right away, but that's where I think he can get to sooner rather than later. Fantastic edge defender, run defender, setting the edge, and then plus upside as a pass rusher that might just take a little bit of time, but he would come in and immediately be, I think, an early down defensive end for Green Bay with some pass rush upside down the road. Number 23, Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon. Immediately come in, play next to Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt. I think you could play Clark and Harmon together, Harmon and Wyatt together. He would also potentially be a little bit of kind of like a Kenny Clark replacement, probably in 2026. Fantastic fit for Green Bay. Really great athleticism. Love how I think he would be able to get after the quarterback. I mean, you can never really project that stuff if they're going to be able to come in and really just hit the ground running, but he would immediately give Green Bay some rotational ability at that defensive tackle spot and be a really fun piece along that defensive front. Number 24, Gray Zabel, North Dakota State, offensive lineman. This would probably be one that, again, has some flexibility to play tackle or guard. if I'm Green Bay, I'm probably rotating Jordan Morgan again and Rasheed Walker at left tackle, and I'm going to get Zabel working at right guard. He would probably be a rotational piece with Sean Ryan this year, and then take over for him at starting right guard in 2026. Donovan Ezeraku, I've talked about him a lot. One of my favorite guys in this draft. He can win in a variety of different ways. He's got a spin move. He's just got everything. He can win. He does not have speed to power. He's not a bull rush guy, but pretty much every other move he has at his disposal. Would again give Green Bay a different flavor of edge rusher. Worked with Jeff Hafley at Boston College when they were there together. Vince Ogabasi, the assistant defensive line coach, was his mentor at Boston College. There's certainly some synergy there, but a little bit shorter and lighter than what Green Bay usually looks at defensive end. But he would be a really unique piece and a different type of pass rusher than they currently have on the roster. James Pierce Jr., defensive end out of Tennessee, height speed guy. He's kind of tall and wiry, but he's got great speed, does convert some speed to power, doesn't have a ton of moves, but doesn't need a ton of moves. Not usually Green Bay's type here, not usually my type here, but the more you watch him on tape, the more you kind of see him win and figure out ways. I don't think it's going to translate perfectly to the NFL, but he would certainly bring a speed rusher on the outside, get him out wide, get him that runway, and get him collapsing, offensive tackles back into the quarterback. I think you can find a way to make it work, but I think there's some other defensive ends that maybe fit a little bit better for Green Bay. Speaking of which, Shamar Stewart, defensive end, Texas A&M. Freak athlete, did not have a ton of production in college, as you all know. And he would be somebody that would come in and, for those of you who are not maybe happy about it, kind of similar potential trajectory of Rashawn Gary and LVN, although I do think Stewart has the ability to come in and make an impact a whole heck of a lot sooner. I loved his tape. Would I have liked to have seen him get more sacks? Yes. Would I have liked to have seen him get more tackles for loss? Yes. Is there more production that should be there? Absolutely. But do I think he has somebody that can be somebody who comes in and causes a lot of havoc and chaos for opposing offensive linemen? Big time. I think he's going to be a pain to go against. And I think as he matures as a edge defender and gets more pass rush moves in his arsenal, I legitimately think he can be one of the better players coming out of this draft. But he'd come in and be a rotational player for them immediately at defensive end. Walter Nolan, we did a big breakdown on yesterday. Defensive tackle, Mississippi, Ole Miss, if you will. I know he graded better as a run defender, but to me, more of a pass rusher than a run defender. You want to get him penetrating and in the backfield. That's when he's at his best. A little bit too much of another sort of Devontae Wyatt and sort of some of the same strengths and weaknesses there. But if you're not thinking that Wyatt's going to be back in 2026, you could get his replacement right now. And in the meantime, play both of those guys together, rotate them, and hope that you get a little bit more pressure and hope that Nolan can reach his upside a little bit sooner rather than later. Number 29, Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. This is a tough one to fit in this defense because you have all those great safeties already. I'd probably, again, him and Javon Bullard could both play a little bit in the big nickel role. You can also play him a little bit of that nickel linebacker. This is even a sort of, I think, worse scenario than the other safety that we talked about. Nick Emanwari. I think Emanwari, you'd even be able to find more things to do with. I'm not quite as confident to saying the same about Malachi Starks, but he does have versatility. Again, it's a really difficult way to figure out how you would use him with the current depth on your defense, but he is a very unique piece. He's a good safety. I guess he would just come in and back up Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams for the time being, and then you kind of figure out the rest later. Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan, big 330-pounder. He's going to be somebody that's going to eat a ton of blocks and I think keep Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker clean. You would be able to move Kenny Clark over more to a 3 technique role. So you've got Grant and Clark starting on early downs. Grant can also pressure from inside. He can split double teams. He can, kind of force the pocket back into the quarterback using a little bit of a bull rush. He's a really fun player. Big, again, massive guy that would add a lot of space eating and run stuffing to the interior of that defensive line. 31, Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle out of Texas. This, again, is going to be a platoon probably with Rasheed Walker, and you get him going at left tackle, get Morgan back to right guard, have him platooning with Sean Ryan. And then in 2026, you're going with an all Banks left side of your offensive line with Kelvin Banks at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, and then at right guard, you'd be probably looking at Jordan Morgan next to Zach Tom with Elton Jenkins still at center. 32, Mason Taylor, tight end. Jason Taylor, the old Miami Dolphin, his kid. Tall, linear tight end, sort of seam guy. This just feels like complete overkill to Luke Musgrave. You already have this guy on the roster. Unless you are all the way out on Luke Musgrave, this just does not make sense. But if you want Luke Musgrave 2.0, go get Mason Taylor. And I guess you could have 2 Luke Musgraves then, which sure, go for it. Number 33, Luther Burden III. I think he's the best wide receiver in this draft. I think he can play everywhere. Wide receiver out of Missouri, by the way. It's just a question of, can he play in the slot, or can he play outside, or is he just a slot guy? And then is he somebody that Green Bay would have that interest in? If he's just a slot guy, it's an issue. He does not run block very well at all, which is also an issue. But man, is he a fantastic wide receiver. Would love that pick. I think you can play him on the outside and he'd be a dynamic playmaker from day one for Green Bay. Number 39, Travion Henderson, running back out of Ohio State. Really fun player. Pass pro is really good. Catches the ball out of the backfield really well. Great on screens. Fantastic speed. I think his vision at the line of scrimmage could use a little bit of work, or that's kind of an instinctual thing. I'm not sure how much that gets better, but man, you give him a crease and he's gone. Would be a thunder lightning to Josh Jacobs. And then, Marshawn Lloyd, unfortunately, in that situation, probably has to take a little bit of a step back. Again, overkill at the position, but a very, very fun player. 35, Maxwell Hairston, corner out of Kentucky, has no idea how good he can be. He is a super fast, tall, linear outside corner that also has very good movement skills. If you can get him, sort of learning all of the nuances and tricks of the trade, he can be as good of a corner. Think of Nate Wiggins this past year, but a little bit bigger than Nate Wiggins, the Baltimore Ravens corner. I liked Wiggins a little bit more, but he's kind of in that same super speedy, change of direction kind of guy. Again, a little bit tall, a little bit wirier, and but also has long limbs to knock away some passes as well. He would immediately come in and compete as a potential starting outside corner. Number 36, Jackson Dart would just be competing with Malik Willis to be your backup, and then would be your backup in 2026. Again, quarterback out of Ole Miss. 37, Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State, coming off I believe it was a torn patella. He would be able to be probably your left tackle replacement in 2026. I think you get him back at some point in 2025, probably start platooning him with Rasheed Walker, and then again, start Jordan Morgan platooning with Sean Ryan at right guard. And then going into 2026, Josh Simmons would be your left tackle starter. Jordan Morgan would be your right guard starter in all likelihood. Number 38, Quinshad Judkins, running back out of Ohio State. Everything that we basically just said about Travion Henderson, same thing here. Really, really fun back, compact runner. You can kind of see, again, the speed here. He is not afraid of contact. This would be, again, a really fun 1-2 punch with Josh Jacobs. You kind of have a Marshawn Lloyd here already. I'm not sure this would be, again, the right move to make, but it would certainly stack your running back room in a very, very fun way. Number 39, Josh Connerly, offensive tackle out of Oregon. I think this is going to have to be a guy that probably sits for a year. In this situation, he would be somebody that could do that. Your hope would be that he could take over at left tackle for Rasheed Walker in 2026, but I think he's going to need some work, if I'm being honest. But in the meantime, he's going to give you depth along the offensive line, and the hope again would be starting left tackle in 2026. Number 40, Benjamin Morrison, corner out of Notre Dame. Really, really liked him. Great fit in Jeff Hafley's defense. Would come in and compete at outside corner right away with Nate Hobbs and Keyshawn Nixon, although I think Keyshawn Nixon has that set. Think he could, potentially play an outside corner on, obvious passing downs with Nixon at the other, and then move Nate Hobbs into the slot. But either way, gives you a lot of depth and competition at all of those spots, and would be a really fun player to add to that secondary. And again, fits very well within Jeff Hafley's defense. Number 41, Donovan Jackson, guard for Ohio State. This is somebody I would look, I know he played guard and tackle at Ohio State. I would look to do right guard. I think he'd be your starter at right guard starting in 2026. Then again, you put Morgan and Rasheed Walker platooning at left tackle, with Morgan taking over next year with Rasheed likely leaving. But I think Donovan Jackson can be a very good starting right guard in this league. And the hope would be he'd be fully ready to go starting next year, meaning you platoon him this year, and then he'd be already ready to be a really good starter at right guard starting in 2026. Trey Amos, really like his game. Another Amos defensive back in Green Bay. The last one worked out pretty well. I think probably a second round guy here. I think first would be very early for him, but he'd come in and compete at outside corner right away with Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs could go inside on passing downs with Amos and Nixon on the outside. And then, of course, just competing with Carrington Valentine at that spot as well. Number 43, Elijah Arroyo, tight end out of Miami. This again is an interesting one. I do think he can play a little bit more of that H-back role. So a little bit different than Musgrave and Kraft, where I think, Musgrave can be kind of your inline, almost like big wide receiver. Tucker Kraft's your overall tight end. And then Arroyo could be a little bit more of your H-back guy. But he's also a little bit overkill where he's a receiving tight end. You have one of those already in Luke Musgrave. Don't think that you need this, but at least a little bit of a difference with some of the stuff he can bring to the table. And again, maybe being used in that H-back role in the time being. Number 44, Carson Schweschinger, linebacker out of UCLA, would immediately come in and be your third linebacker, would probably, again, signify a exit for Quay Walker, not having to pay his fifth-year option, would be a really fun starting tandem with Edgerrin Cooper and Schweschinger moving forward. And then right now this year, competing with Isaiah McDuffie for that number 3 spot, and I guess Tyron Hopper as well in 2025. Number 45, Caleb Johnson. This would be a potential long-term Josh Jacobs replacement. Maybe not even, certainly not this year, maybe not even in 2026, but in 2027. In the meantime, good depth at the position. I'd probably go, again, maybe one of those running backs. Well, I wouldn't go running back at all, but I like the other running backs that we've mentioned earlier a little bit better. I think would add a little bit more juice to this team. But if you want to be a ground and pound running team, having Caleb Johnson and Josh Jacobs would be a decent way to do that. Would give you some Jacobs insurance in the meantime, where if Jacobs goes down, you still have a running back that can come in, pound the rock, and then Marshawn Lloyd can kind of be the lightning to Caleb Johnson's thunder, especially in the long term as well. Number 46, Landon Jackson, huge edge rusher out of Arkansas. I think he's a really surprisingly freaky athletic dude, 6'6", 264, seemingly would fit what Green Bay is looking for. Can set the edge, but has a very, very high motor, finds ways to win in the backfield. This is a very talented defensive end, and he would come in and be a rotational piece right away, and somebody that I think would compete with LVN for starting time down the line. Number 47, Darius Alexander, defensive tackle out of Toledo, a little bit overage, small school kid. He would be able to come in and be, I don't think competition, but another 3 technique, probably backing up Devontae Wyatt. And then theoretically, if Wyatt were to leave next year, kind of taking over as that 3 technique next to Kenny Clark, if he's still there, or whoever is kind of your bigger nose tackle / defensive tackle, kind of eating those blocks. And again, Alexander, more the 3 technique type. Number 48, Marcus Mbao, offensive tackle out of Purdue. Go back to the exact same thing that I said about, who was that? It was it? Oh, it was Josh Connerly, where I think he's just going to need some time. I think he's going to need some time to develop and really kind of come into his own. I don't think he's going to be ready to play right away. So the hope would be you sit him basically for a year. He's probably your 7th offensive lineman to begin with, or at least competing for it. And then hopefully he's ready to take over for Rasheed Walker at left tackle in 2026. Nick Scorton, defensive end out of Texas A&M, is number 49 on the list. Overweight in 2024, not his fault. That's what Texas A&M seemingly wanted him to be at. Bulked up a little bit, probably too much, played around 280. He did his pro day where he kind of played at, or I think more in the 250, 260 range, and apparently looked fantastic. That's where he played at Purdue prior to going to Texas A&M. You go back and look at that tape and you see a much more dynamic player. I think either way, he fits in Green Bay. And if you could get him in the second round, he would be a very, very nice rotational piece for the Packers right out of the gate. And I think his tape I think just his play in the NFL with him being at the right weight and coming in more around that 260 is going to fit him much better. He's going to be a much more explosive player than what we saw at Texas A&M this past year. Number 50, Azare Thomas, corner out of Florida State. Really good length, good athleticism, good intangibles and instincts. He would, again, come in and compete right away at outside corner. And again, then you could potentially move Nate Hobbs into the slot on those obvious passing downs. Those are your top 50 players per Daniel Jeremiah in this draft. Those are how they would fit in Green Bay. Nothing, I think, really, no sort of action items for anything that you need to, let me know in chat or anything. Let me know if, who you're most interested in. I am interested in that to see, who you guys are leaning towards at this point. A very interesting draft class of the people that we just named. There's a good, for sure, Green Bay is going to take one of those 50. Maybe they could end up with two of those 50. You never quite know. We'll see what Green Bay ends up with, but a lot of very intriguing options that could all fit in a variety of different ways with the Green Bay Packers. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you as always for joining me. Be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode because we're here 365 days for you. Shout out to our All Pro and Hall of Fame members: Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Peter Ataka, Jay Zimmerman, B Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gessford, Dylan Pat Scott, Bobby Santoro, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, Razul Douglas Time, Jake Koner, Carla Delgado, Willie Winkle, Stinkle, and Jen Wright. See you guys tomorrow, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.